In the latest offering from Rockstar Games, you can wander across the vast expanses of the American West, go hunting in snow-topped mountains, beat farmers to death, ride your horse along the banks of a lake at sunset, beat tramps to death, set up your camp in remote valleys, beat random strangers to death, quietly pass the time fishing in remote rivers, beat suffragettes to death, experience travelling the country on steam locomotives, then rob them and beat everyone to death. I can see a theme developing here, and it's fucking brilliant. Welcome to Red Dead Redemption 2, the sociopathic cowboy simulator. Warning, this video contains mild spoilers. The legacy and history of the Wild West permeates throughout Western culture and throughout a lot of the globe. Everyone knows what a cowboy is. Nearly everyone has owned a pair of jeans. When a kid picks up a toy pistol, his first reaction is to spin it on his finger. And if you hear this sound, you know exactly what it means. To this very day, we still have rodeos, fast draw competitions, cowboy hats, and arseless chaps. The classic Western is embedded in every corner of our culture and still influences movies, music, books, and video games today in subtle and not so subtle ways. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the long-awaited prequel to the game that shares the same title. It is hotly tipped to be a serious contender for Game of the Year 2018, received by many as a work of art, and also sadly accepted by most sensible folk as being a platform for the second biggest airdrop of in-game microtransactions since GTA 5. The other game from Take-Two Interactive, 2K Games and Rockstar that you may have heard of. A game that made millions from sales and literally billions from peddling microtransactions. Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place in a fictional America, which is pretty much a miniaturised version of the Americas of 1899. It's like someone took a slice of New Orleans, Louisiana, the Rocky Mountains, Oklahoma and Texas, stuck them all together and made a period characterisation of the United States in miniature. Westworld comparisons aside, it's nicely done and gives the already huge game map the feeling of being even larger than it is, as you transition between different geographies as you travel across the map. The world is beautiful, and there is still more natural wildlife than people knocking around to hunt it to extinction. And God knows I fucking tried. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a Western-themed open-world action game set during a pivotal time in American history. Law, bureaucracy, industrialisation, and just as importantly Pinkertons were in ascendancy, and increasingly the traditional outlaws of the Wild West were running out of places to hide. This was the era of the end of lawlessness, and end of the traditional Wild West. Think of films like The Wild Bunch, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. This was the end of the era of rampant banditry, when you couldn't just rob a bank and move to the next town until things cooled down. The net was closing around many of the most lawless of the era. Increasingly, it was becoming a world where the lawless could run, but they could no longer safely hide. But let's not overstate the influence of the Pinkertons. From what I've researched at least, the Pinkertons did a spectacular job at chasing criminals away from their hunting grounds, but were less successful at actually catching the fuckers. In fact, some would say that Pinkertons had two strengths: chasing criminals into the arms of their captors, and taking big paychecks from ruthless industrialists for using espionage, subterfuge and criminal methods to fuck over completely legitimate workers' unions. So I guess, in a quite literal sense, This was the period where one bunch of ruthless thieves were being made extinct by another species of equally ruthless thieves. Only one was called an outlaw and the other was called an industrialist. But it wasn't just the actions of law enforcement that spelled the end of the Wild West. The main thing that was changing was the country itself. As transport, communication, bureaucracy and governance grew, the country effectively became a much smaller place. When you're trying to hide with a $10,000 bounty on your head, paid for by the dude you keep robbing. Imagine walking down the street tomorrow and seeing a poster with your face on it saying, "Wanted dead or alive, reward $250,000 in today's money." You would soon find out who your real friends were. Hell, I've seen YouTubers sell out their principals for a few pairs of headphones and some channel promotion. For $250,000, they'd probably serve up their mothers on a fucking barbecue. But this aside, railroads, telegrams, centralisation of governance, modernisation of legal structures and giant big fat fucking bounties bankrolled by industrialists ended up making nowhere safe and nowhere entirely isolated. This is the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. You are one of the last breed of old school outlaws, and sooner or later, you know you are going to get fucked. So what is the game like to play? Well, it's insanely organic. This is not a game where you obsess about your stats. Christ, I barely ever even looked at the number shit. This is a game where you gauge your success by how dead you are, or how well the gunfights are going. This is a game where you feel your way through it. The prologue serves as a great induction for the game and the story. It holds your grubby hand whilst it introduces you to a range of old world activities, which also make you feel like you're part of the period. You will ride a horse and carriage, skin a deer, rob a train, get into some gunfights. You'll probably lose your hat several times, which is an ongoing theme/meme. As you get used to the game, you start to genuinely feel the visceral nature of the period. This is a world of snow, mud, wood, and leather. It's a world of steel, iron, tin, and fire. The limits of technology are repeating firearms and steam trains. And by the time you finish the prologue, you feel like you're part of that world. You will also appreciate that the world is modernising. In a few months' time, the Wright brothers will fly their first plane, and the First World War starts in 15 years' time. The attention to detail is superb, and the game is mostly polished brilliantly. Your horse shits. Your arrows quiver when they hit a hard surface. Your passing leaves furrows in the snow. And when you carry a skinned deer on your shoulder, it leaves blood on your clothes. When you walk into a lake, you can watch the same blood wash off into the crystal reflective waters. It's a very well crafted game. Gear degrades and needs maintenance. Your options at the barbers are limited by your hair length. You get dirty, you gain and lose weight. You have to eat, bathe, shave, clean your gun and pick the right clothes to wear based on the temperature and weather conditions. And just as importantly, how much you need to hide your identity. And just as you are kicking back, soaking up the late 19th century ambience and pleasant aromas of horseshit, bang, it all fucking kicks off. And you're suddenly in the middle of some massive clusterfuck shootout fighting for your life. This is an outlaw simulator, and it simulates the entire environment. The way you interact with the world affects the responses you get, and what NPCs do in the world has a sense and order to you. You can be a nice guy, or you can be an absolute fucker. You have your quests to keep you moving forward, but it's open world, where you can make nice with the locals or rob and kill everything in sight. Just make sure you don't get fucking caught doing it. The entire game is full of minigames to distract you and service the agenda of the main game. The camp is your base of operations, an outlaw safe space. Upgrade it and it furnishes you with pots and boons. Do your chores and impress your gang. Play dress up Barbie at your wardrobe and give yourself a Brazilian at the shaving station. and adorn your camp with tasteless and vulgar decorations like bone chimes and animal skulls. You know, the equivalent of 19th century IKEA cowboy furnishing, I guess. You have to bond with and maintain your horse. The horse testicles issue is meme-worthy. Their scrotums expand and contract based on the ambient temperature. Seriously, whoever spotted that is weirder than me. And no, that is not a compliment. There are actual real mini-games to distract you from the mini-games, like poker, dominoes and five-finger fillet. There is hunting. Make money, feed the camp, skin raccoons, eat raccoons. Get bored and just start snap shooting anything you ride past because, you know, it's historically accurate, sadly. In the early days, it's really quite easy to fuck things up, either through inexperience, ineptitude, struggling with the controls, or just plain fucking stupidity. I managed to achieve some professional level fuckery. I shot the person I was speaking to in the tit by accident, ran over a woman on my horse and got a bounty, and lost my shiny special pony and ended up with a shitty brown one following me around instead. I'm pretty sure the fancy horse came with my special edition pre-order, so I was less than impressed when it just fucking vanished. I guess they'll soon have the in-game Microtransactions store up and running, and they'll try and sell me a new one. Immersion was on occasion very slightly broken at early game by the fact that sometimes if you started a quest late in the evening, it would gradually stop being dusk and become day again for the duration of the quest. I couldn't work out at first if it was a design choice or if it was just broken. But overall, if there was a 2018 Immersion Award, this game will win it. And you are going to get bored of people using the word immersion when describing this game, myself included. It barely needs to be said that the critical reception has been overwhelmingly positive. A lot of players have made complaints that the game is not user-friendly enough. There are many systems in the game that require you to actually do the thing in real time, like eat, drink, skin deer and take a bath. You don't just click and complete. You actually have to go through the process of doing the thing. If you leave your horse 5 miles away, when you whistle, he won't instantly teleport to you. Some people are losing their shit about this. Personally, I think it's fine. I get it. I get the arguments. I appreciate what people are saying. But I think these criticisms are flawed because they are based on one assumption. The assumption is that there is a singular, correct way to make a game. And I think this is the point. The sometimes laborious way that some tasks are completed are designed precisely that way because they fit this game. A bath takes time because it's a big deal when you're living in an era and location where you would be lucky to have 1 bath per month. Besides, I simply cannot complain about an in-game bathing mechanism that involves a prostitute giving you a furtive tug under the bubble bath foam. Anyone who feels compelled to gripe about that is clearly a person who fails to appreciate the subtleties of bubble baths. Or prostitutes. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a highly immersive, experiential and most importantly, patient game. It's a game where you sip a whiskey and soak up the atmosphere as you ride through the hills. It's not a fast-paced grinding game. It's not a twitch reflex game. If you're in too much of a hurry to skin a deer or fetch your horse, then you're playing the wrong game. These mechanics fit this game. There is no single universal correct way for all games to do this. They chose these mechanics because it fits this game. Most reviewers have been overwhelmingly positive, but the reviewer reception is far higher than the user. 97 for critics, 7.7 with users currently on Metacritic. The YouTuber Coach Toolshed made a valid commentary on this game, becoming beyond criticism, and he has a good fucking point. I mean, let's face it, it's already got a free pass from critics for the pay-to-win content. I've not heard anyone comment on the fact that the pre-order bonus is early access to guns and some of the best horses available early game. There's a link to his video in the description. Videogamedunkey slammed this game for its late game retardation. I won't go into detail, but let's just say he criticises Rockstar for being great at establishing stories, but not so great at bringing them to a climax. I have not finished this game because I've spent a week thrashing every side quest and activity, robbing farmers blind, and spending a fucking unhealthy amount of time at the tailors in St. Denis. So I can't say firsthand if this is the case. But based on his video and my research, the end of the main plotline is indeed potentially terrible. And I'm talking perhaps Fallout 3 pre-DLC fucking disappointingly ill-considered and cretinous. This said, you could still play Fallout 3 for 1,000 hours and just not finish the main questline. I imagine people may do the same here. Like I said, I chose not to power through the main quest because that would not be how I play a game like this. But let's just agree that the ending is controversial and leave it at that. Just don't fucking Google it. I Googled it for you, so I'm technically your spoiler crash test dummy. And all I'll say is this. I'm gonna have to play it all the way to the end to see what I think. As will anyone. So what is the financial situation like with the game? Well, it's already made $1 billion in sales. This is a surprise, said no one ever. It's no secret that Rockstar Games made millions on Grand Theft Auto 5, but they made billions on the microtransactions, and therein is the problem for me. Red Dead Redemption 2 launched without them, and without the multiplayer, but we know they are coming. When I first got to my camp, I seamlessly discovered I could immediately use the interface to dress my character in pretty and not so pretty clothes. Considering how counterintuitive some of the UI is, I was somewhat surprised with how I practically fell face first into the dress-up Barbie minigame. And just as I was finished turning my rustic cowboy into a dodgy-looking gunslinger in cooler summer clothes, both literally and figuratively, then it hit me. This clothing minigame is going to be a primary portal for facilitating a giant fucking avalanche of microtransactions to flood out of my screen. So when someone says this game doesn't have microtransactions, just look them straight in the eye and say, this is not even its final form. In the hurry to applaud the technical and creative achievements of this game, many people seem to have missed a few significant points. It's pay to win. The Special Edition contains free guns at the gunsmiths, and the Ultimate Edition contains free weapons to use in multiplayer mode. Quite what that means, and what advantage that will give you is uncertain at this point. But one thing is as clear as fucking day. This game sells you in-game loot, and most people are letting it slip under the radar because they're too busy fluffing off the rest of the game's lofty achievements. So how does it perform technically? The game itself, at least on Xbox, runs incredibly well, but has some random bugs that on the odd occasion get fucking annoying. I've had issues with weapons disappearing. I owned a carbine repeater, then picked up a worn carbine repeater during a gunfight. Then when it was over, I stopped playing. When I logged back in the next day, I no longer owned either carbine repeater. I probably wouldn't have noticed, but at the time I was saving up for a better weapon, so having to piss away that money replacing something I already owned was a dick in the arse. Now I'm paying closer attention, the gun inventory is doing something slightly weird with the gunsmith's catalogue, not correctly displaying which guns I already own. When a core mechanic of this game is obsessing about your weaponry, they need to sort this shit out quickly. I had one issue where I was in the middle of a cutscene, fencing a stolen horse and cart, and I think police turned up to investigate. The game kind of paused, wigged out, I lost my UI and just had to run blind until my game stopped fizzing and popping and my UI returned. I also had an issue where the vendor screen kept instantly cancelling itself at every vendor in St. Denis. Eventually I just had to sack the whole expedition and go questing for a while instead. Sure, it eventually fixed itself, but it was a massive fuck around that wasted a few hours of my life. Some of the loading screens were lengthy, and I had one eternal loading screen that required me to restart my Xbox. Mostly, the game looks beautiful, but there were a few issues with clipping. The Mauser pistol sticks right out of the holster really high, because clearly some dude at the office didn't realise that this is not the same shape as this, so it ends up looking like this. Everything with the guns is so nicely done and central to the game, it's a shame they fucked this up. It was like painting a huge zit on the Mona Lisa. It draws your eye to it and spoils the painting. Although thinking about it now, the Mona Lisa is a fairly shitty, overrated painting anyway. I also had a few issues with bandoliers levitating above my character. On one occasion I had my coattails flapping in the wind, and they stayed there, even when I got off my horse and walked around my camp. Overall, the bugs were not too bad, but I was disappointed about the gun fuckery. I still have this uncertain feeling that at any point one of my precious guns might just disappear from my inventory, which is not good. But it's nowhere near as bad as a Bethesda game, put it that way. I'm still struggling to wrap my head around the fact that this game is console only. Personally, I think games should launch across all platforms in this day and age. Platform exclusivity is something that should be thrown in a fucking dumpster of gaming history, along with brand specific USB cables, or ambulances that won't pick injured people off the street because they have the wrong insurance policy. As someone put so well in a meme, this game was developed on PC. Why can't I play it on PC? As a PC player, I found this game frustrating at first because I was failing missions for no other reason than struggling with the controller. But on a positive note, the game was at least so damn addictive and compelling that I played so much I can use a controller much better now. This said, Rockstar / Take-Two Interactive / 2K Games made billions of free cash on pixels and microtransactions with the shark cards in GTA 5. Not doing a cross-platform launch on console and PC is unforgivable. Some people claim that it's because they want the PC launch to be perfect and not a classic bad rushed port. Well, that's utter bullshit. They have infinite funds. The only reason for not having a PC launch is contractual or financial. It's not fucking logistical. They have the money to simultaneously develop Red Dead Redemption 2 10 times over and have money left to spare. I'm pretty sure the reasons for delaying the PC launch by maybe a couple of years, or maybe never, is everything to do with PlayStation exclusivity and not funding. The controls in general have taken a bit of flack for being clunky and not particularly easy to use. But I have to be honest here, I'm not a regular console user, so I can't tell what is the controls and what's me most of the time. I did notice that at times you use your sticks and then go into a sub-menu where now you don't use your sticks, you use the paddle. And there is just zero reason for that. I have more issue with the fact that it has an inventory system based on a 1990s cell phone menu, where I very quickly just lost track of what was important or useful. I guess on one front the game is very organic, in that I never knew what level I was, what my gun skill was, or shit like that. I never thought, oh shit, I need to add plus 5% crit to this or that. It's not that kind of game. The downside of that is that there's definitely things in this game I've never bothered to check, learn or manage, because it didn't seem to matter a shit. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, I'm just saying having the right gun in your holster, getting to cover fast, and avoiding being flanked determines the outcome of most fights. The rest is decoration. I would say, however, that either I totally misunderstood the whole weapon management system, or it's passable at best. The pistols worked just fine, and I had no problem with those, but my long guns were a constant hassle to manage through the fucky inventory wheel. And for no logical fucking reason, every time you went to camp or did certain quests, the long gun holster contents would default to jack shit. It would have been nice to see some kind of easy default bind at least. Apparently you can do this at a gunsmith, but it still resets from time to time. Now maybe I missed things, and maybe I'm a dumbass, and I didn't use it right. Then again, maybe it should be so obvious that even dumbasses like me can figure it out. But overall, it's not very functional. I can't tell you the amount of times I had to fuck around in my inventory hot swapping whilst hunting, and just as importantly, the number of times I died to bounty hunters because I went to pull out a fucking 6-shooter and pulled out a 2.2 varmint rifle or a bow. Not good when this is apparently a game about split-second quick draw. I mean, imagine watching The Quick and the Dead and one of the guys accidentally pulling out a bow instead of a pistol. They really need to fix that. Oh, and the fast travel system should win a prize for being the least intuitive fast travel system in modern gaming history. There is a complete disconnect between your in-game navigation system using a map and the fast travel map that uses exclusively location names. I was constantly having to flip back and forth to see where the fuck I needed to be. If they made me input the location using fucking Linux code, it would have been slightly less of a fucking ball ache. Seriously, at one point I actually had to Google the map on my PC. On top of this, it only works between specific locations, and this fact combined with loading screens, more epic in scale than John Ford's directing career. Most of the time it was quicker to just say fuck this and ride straight there on My Little Pony. Personally, I reckon they should have the stagecoaches and trains permanently unlocked and sack the rest of the fast travel map at the camp. The compromise between utility and realism has created a fucky system which fails to service either agenda well. I have to admit though, that compared to say Halo or a Destiny game, this is far friendlier to play if you're a console ineffective like me. Add to this, they have a kind of VATS light aiming system called Deadeye. So if you keep topped up on the right kind of nutrition, you'll find yourself magically pointing your guns on target during the hectic gun battles. My aim is shite with a console controller, so this was the trainer wheels I desperately needed to relax into and enjoy this game. The hardcore can turn this off completely, but I can't ADS for shit on console, so for me it was wonderful. I felt like a gunslinger, and that's the whole point, right? What you get at launch with this game is value for money. This is a well-crafted, mature and visceral experience. But let's not forget that this game is far from finished, and this is probably going to be a good and a bad thing. The game released at launch is basically the story mode, a heavily storied quest-driven open world sandbox of sorts. There is still a host of online multiplayer to come. Quite what form and function will be involved with that is still to be precisely defined. No doubt, given the current climate, someone will be asking for Battle Royale and Zombie Mode. And I'm not even sure if I'm kidding. Whilst the richly crafted open world is spectacular in its enormity and rich in its detail, the doors in St. Denis are a fucking joke. Very early game, I took a train to St. Denis, and it appears to be a town entirely populated by irritable horse riders and fake buildings. I did not at any time find a single real fucking door to a real fucking building. I gave up and rode home. Sure, about 8 of them unlocked later, but it was literally the elephant's graveyard for fake video game doors. Some of the character choices were interesting. So far, I've only met one person with a British accent, and he was an incompetent transvestite con man running a fake circus show. Offence duly taken. There is the stereotypical, friendly, blarney, drunken Irish gang member. I guess these characters stick out precisely because the rest of the characterisation avoids cliches or cheap cultural stereotyping. Overall though, the writing and characters are solid, although I'm sure they'll get some shit for the quest where, essentially, you engage in pugilism in order to instill some sense into a gentleman with microcephaly. That's a posh way of saying there is a quest where you beat the fucking shit out of a disabled kid. I'm not even sure what point they were trying to make there, and I'm still scratching my head about that one. Notably, they are also basically the nicest bunch of murderous outlaws ever, which made me snigger when I realised it. I think Rockstar have boxed very clever with their main character design in the story. They immediately and subtly weave a narrative that will avoid triggering attacks for political correctness, and it's designed to neutralise any Polygon-esque SJW criticisms of the game. Within the first hour of the story, the protagonist Arthur has his politically correct credentials subtly cemented. He is a ruthless villain who is not racist because he has a non-white friend and sidekick, a mixed race buddy of African American and Native American descent. He also expresses disdain at the treatment of the Native American people. The arseholes in the gang are all white men. The gang has plenty of strong female members who are treated as equals. It's very clever, very subtle stuff, but once you see it, it's unmissable. I'm not passing judgment, I'm just noting that it is incredibly mindful of being politically correct in a way that flies under the radar. So yeah, despite dialogue indicating that Arthur, the main protagonist, would kill you for shits and giggles and dump your body in a fucking ditch if you wanted your hat, Rockstar immediately established that he's racially tolerant, an advocate of the American First Nations, treats women as equals, and is an all-round inclusivity kind of guy. Impossible? No. Accidental? Fuck no. Implausible? Well, yes, given his occupation and historical context. We're supposed to believe that Arthur is a murderous shit with no other loyalty than the gang. And human rights. He's a ruthless murdering thief with a healthy interest in civil rights, equality and social justice. And any of the murderous evil Henry does in the game has to be instigated by the player. So if he is a big bad meanie, then that's our fault, not Rockstar's. The ultimate example of this being the YouTuber Shirrako, who got his account temporarily banned over the instant outrage caused when he made a short video about punching a suffragette NPC in the mouth in St. Denis. There have been very few complaints about the violence intrinsic to the game itself. Killing cops is fine, murdering poor farmers is fine, beating drunks to death is fine. Generally, killing and murdering in this game, if it's generic men, is fine. But punch one suffragette in the chops and everyone loses their shit. I think the suffragettes were brave, noble women who were ahead of their time, who rightly deserve respect for their sacrifices. I'm just not convinced that respect extends to banning YouTube accounts because you punched one in the fucking kisser in a video game 120 years later. So yeah, I think the narrative design is very clever, albeit slightly pretentious. I mean, at the time America had only banned slavery 34 years earlier, and many Americans still hated indigenous Indians because they sided with the British during the War of Independence in order to limit settler expansion into the interior. In the years that followed, Native Americans were the victim of wholesale extermination. Some people claim there were only 2 million of them to start with, some claim 20, some 50. Who knows who is right, but personally I think people are deliberately underrepresenting the numbers to minimise the scale of the genocide. I mean, at the same point in history the population was 18 million in West Asia, 18 million in South America, 47 million in Africa. But apparently we're supposed to believe that one of the most fertile and food abundant regions on the planet only had 2 million indigenous people living there when the white settlers turned up. A country with billions of half-deaf, half-blind bison wandering around just waiting to be fucking eaten. Only supported 2 million people? I don't believe it. The population was most likely well above 20 million, and there are only less than 5 million Native Americans left today. They were slaughtered wholesale, and that kind of shit doesn't go down because of mild intolerance or casual indifference. That is industrial level extermination. It was possibly the biggest ethnic cleansing in history. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that despite Arthur's occupation as a bandit, disposition as a murderer, historical context of slavery and enthusiastic Native American genocide, we are supposed to believe that he's a politically correct, gender-sensitive kind of guy that never says anything dodgy or racist whilst he's killing you because he wants your fucking hat. It is very clever how they have handled this, but you have to admit it's slightly unrealistic and worthy of at least a few smirks. Then again, we live in the age of outrage, and they had to create the character of Arthur in a way that neither caused a backlash against political correctness or a backlash from the SJW snowflakes. I mention all of this because I think it's important we don't forget the historical contexts and historical injustices, but I'm not criticising them for their artistic choices with the character of Arthur. I mean, I'm a staunch fan of realism and narrative consistency in video games, but in a rare show of clemency, I'm going to give Rockstar a hall pass on this one, because I don't think this game would be improved by making Arthur 100% authentic. No part of the player experience would be enhanced if Arthur was a miserable, racist tossbag wandering around grumbling about niggers and Injuns, spitting on Chinese labourers and slapping women. For once, I think I'm happy to keep the slightly fantasy cowboy we get in this game, because if you want Arthur to be an arsehole, there is plenty of opportunity to pursue that agenda within the game yourself. Even if Arthur is technically the 1890s equivalent of a soy boy with a six-shooter. No discussion of this game could avoid mentioning the obvious similarities with Kingdom Come Deliverance by Warhorse Studios. Rockstar has had the last 10 months to study Kingdom Come Deliverance, and whilst it's entirely possible that no single direct change occurred as a result, Warhorse fans will notice some identical mechanics, and some are already laughing at the fact that when Warhorse did it, people complained, but now Rockstar did it, and everyone's fine with it. NPC reactions based on cleanliness, NPC proximity rules, wanted mechanics, horses as transport and inventory mechanics, bounty mechanics, whistling for your horse, hunting and skinning, treasure maps, random encounters, gambling minigames, rented inn accommodation, bathhouses with prostitutes, NPC reputation mechanics, jail mechanics, upgradable home bases, the fences/millers. These mechanics themselves are not unique to any single game, but I can only think of two games that has all of them. Red Dead Redemption 2 and Kingdom Come Deliverance. I'm struggling to believe that this is entirely coincidental. At the very least, this constitutes an almighty vindication of Warhorse Studios. Personally, I think it's fucking obvious that Rockstar took a sneaky peek at Kingdom Come Deliverance and made a few creative choices based on that. There are just too many identical game mechanics shared between both games. But let's talk about guns. The gunplay and hit location mechanics are great. A shotgun will blow chunks out of people or your fucking head clean off. And one time I drilled off a dude's leg completely with a 20-second burst from a Gatling gun. The guns are really pretty. Maybe based a little bit too much on casual Wikipedia research than reality, but it's nicely done and I obsessively collected and personalised them. The volcanic pistol, for example, is powerful in this game, but in real life it's a fucking donkey. I recommend you watch the Forgotten Weapons video about it, link in the description. Famously, someone once bought a volcanic pistol to commit suicide and shot themselves in the head several times, and survived. If a gun is so weak you can't kill yourself with it by repeatedly shooting yourself in the fucking head at point blank range, even a non-expert like myself would be forced to conclude that it's a weak gun. So, as I have said many times before when it comes to weapon balancing, if you're making a game with guns, hire a fucking weapons expert, not a fucking wizard. These gripes aside, the physical brutality of the game is hard-coded into it. Beat the shit out of someone for a few minutes and you will see exactly what I mean. Overall, it was a great game experience. I did find that there came a point where I really needed to grind some money for the camp in a hurry. I didn't want to cheat and use guides, so I tried out a bunch of different options. And at that point the game did become a little bit of a chore for a while. Overall though, this game does a great job of capturing the end of days of the Old West. The world modernising and industrial economics were becoming firmly rooted in the Americas. The old ways of the West were coming to an end, and Arthur and his crew know they're out of time. A testament to how well this is captured by the game is the example of St. Denis, a generic New Orleans. When I visited there, dressed in my cowboy gear, with my spurs, guns over my back and dirty beard, I felt out of place, and like a fucking anachronism. The town was full of fancy shops, trams, pretty pony and traps, and fucking dandies in fine suits. I was standing there all dirty, smelling of horse piss and 100 miles of hard road, with a skinned deer strapped on the back of my horse. I felt like a caveman visiting the Hilton. I even felt a sneaking pride in my filth at times, and the comments I would elicit from NPCs. And therein lies the point. Sure, they do a great job of capturing the atmosphere with the story, but when the game itself makes you feel the atmosphere because of the essence of its design, well, that shit right there is quality. So what are my tips for Red Dead Redemption 2? First and foremost, just relax into the game. Soak up the scenery, enjoy the story, go hunting in the mountains, and absorb the incredible atmosphere in this game. And then kill someone and see how long you can stamp on their cock and balls before it gets boring. Just as a benchmark, that usually keeps me entertained for about 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Following from this game has a relaxed pace, but never relax too much. I absolutely guarantee you that when you fall asleep at the wheel, bad shit will suddenly go down. The sun is setting, you've been questing all day, you just nailed that perfect buck and have the meat loaded on your horse, you're heading home feeling slightly smug about your successes, and you zone out and start thinking about what you're going to do in the morning. Under these circumstances, the answer is usually waking up in a fucking ditch. On your way back to camp whilst you're blowing bubbles and fantasising about your six-shooters, you will get ambushed by bounty hunters, bandits or a fucking bear, and before you've got your head back in the fight, it's all over. So it's okay to relax, but never relax too much. If you can't do the time, don't do the fucking crime. When you're starting out, be careful about how and where you break the law. Whilst following the main questline, you will no doubt get dragged into trouble in certain places. I would suggest though confining your criminal activities to one area, so you don't have a bounty in other territories. It is very easy to find yourself in a downward spiral where you're doing increasingly desperate shit to make fast money to pay off bounties which only get bigger and bigger as you get caught doing crazier and crazier shit to pay them off. Don't get me wrong, it's fun being chased across the plain by bounty hunters. However, getting into gunfights with the locals every time you want to get a fucking haircut in town can get real expensive really fast. There is nothing wrong with being a criminal. Just don't be a stupid, sloppy criminal. Always make sure there's at least somewhere where there's no bounty on your head. Don't be afraid of being uninformed. Personally, I try to ignore online guides and find my own way. If you are playing this game for the experience, then experience it. Don't learn it on YouTube. If you have to check out any guides, I recommend Upper Echelon Gamers, as they're well researched and mostly spoiler free. I would personally recommend save the research for your second playthrough, but that's just me. Stick with a shitty horse at first. Everyone always crashes their first car and you will be no exception. Save that pay to win pony until you know what you're doing, else you will just fuck it under the wheels of a train. In fact, I would just settle for a bog standard pony until you have money shitting out of your ears. You will be devastated if you scrape together $350 early game for that fancy horse, bond with it, fall in love with it, and then get it killed. A well-heeled Tennessee Walker will do any job just fine, and you can wrangle or steal another if that dies. Save yourself some heartbreak and money troubles until you're competent. Put it this way, I obsessively take care of my horse, and I've managed to kill at least 7 of them. I'm the Grim Reaper of the equestrian world. I rode one under the wheels of a steam locomotive and turned him into mincemeat, ridden one off a cliff, I've smashed them into stagecoaches, and several got shot and killed by the police. Becoming my horse is practically a death sentence, so I've started stealing some backup ponies and training a few up and parking them at the stables in order to build up a reserve. Let's face it, sooner or later they're all going to be horse meat. There are some basic physics which you need to master in Red Dead Redemption 2. Steam trains of the period weigh approximately between 15 and 100 tons depending on the locomotive and how many carriages it's pulling. You and your horse are considerably lighter. You are also not made of metal. When a solid metal mass weighing 1 ton hits a horse and rider made of flesh and bone, usually their teeth fly out in one direction and the contents of their bowels fly out in the opposite direction. Now imagine that, but multiply it by 15 to 100 times. Stay the fuck out of the way of steam trains, because they will crush you and they will crush your horse. In Red Dead Redemption 2, your horse is your transport, mobile bank, getaway vehicle and camper van, so respect it accordingly. My advice would be to treat your horse exactly the same way that you would treat a beautiful woman. Pat it every few minutes, feed it carrots regularly, brush the ticks off it daily, and be respectful. Look the other way when it shits in the middle of the street. Do not forget that you can reverse a horse and cart by holding the right shoulder button and pulling back on the stick. This might make no sense to you now, but you will thank me later. And for the record, a horse and cart has wooden wheels. If you go full Dakar Rally on it, it will go full coach crash on you. As for weaponry, if you have a reliable handgun, reliable repeating rifle and your bow, you'll be good for nearly every situation, be that hunting, robbing or killing. Everything else you choose is mostly a matter of style and personal preference. Weapon modelling is one area of this game where realism seems to have slid straight out of the fucking door, so make your choices based on fun in my opinion. Some guns hit harder, some take longer to reload. Make your choice and spin the wheel. I made my choices based on the following facts. I like well balanced weapons, I like power, capacity and fast reload speed, but I won't completely compromise any one of those things for another. The Schofield was an excellent sidearm. The Lancaster repeater, which is basically a Winchester, was a great capacity repeater that can be topped off and fired mid-reload. The rolling block with scope was a fantastic long-range sniper rifle, especially for doing really good shots when you're hunting. The Schofield, Winchester and rolling block rifle were excellent weapons in real life, and as a trio they will serve you well in game. None of the guns I've used so far were absolute shit. I would certainly not like to get shot with any of them. Pursue the main quest lines. If anything flags up in your base or flags up on the map based on your conversations in the base, just fucking do them. I'm pretty sure they'll be yellow on the map. More temporary quests will be white markers on the map. Going off the reservation and doing stuff like hunting and robbing as a distraction is fine, but you will suffer if you don't pursue the main quests to a degree. Early and mid-game, they unlock weapons, gear and skills you can't bypass. There will be shit you just can't buy and things you just can't do and skills you just can't learn until you've done the appropriate quests. Don't forget to use your mask. And don't forget your mask is not a magical cloak of invisibility. You're a fucking idiot if you don't use it, and an even bigger idiot if you think it will magically grant you immunity from the law. Always try and conceal your identity when doing crime, both with your mask and by changing your clothes regularly. And if that fails, pay the bounty off as quickly as possible. This said, whilst your mask is not a cloak of invisibility, your little satchel is definitely a magical bag of holding. It's the size of a fucking handbag, but somehow you can cram in an apothecary, 20 assorted steaks, 10 books, a bag of feathers, a stack of raccoon pelts, 48 stolen items of jewellery, and 20 packets of cigarettes. Seriously, that fucker is like the TARDIS. A handbag-shaped TARDIS. Remember that roads are organic, follow terrain and landmarks. Lawmen, bounty hunters and your enemies tend to ambush and patrol them. Railroad tracks tend to go as the crow flies in a fairly straight line between locations. It can often be safer to use your waypoint as a general guide for direction. Ignore the route plan and just head towards your target along railroad lines where possible. Just make sure you watch out for trains. You don't want to be face fucked by a locomotive. Or arse fucked. I'm not sexist. Last but not least, don't forget that whilst your honour level is important, murder is basically fun. You paid good money for this game, so there's no harm in enjoying it occasionally. There is no shame in blowing off a little steam with a murderous rampage here or there. Beat up a tramp, ride your horse into that lady who was rude to you outside the shop, or just go up to a stranger and blow his head off with a sawn-off shotgun. It's basically just like therapy, only it's free. Do some murder, then go fishing, and throw all the fish back in the water to repair your honour value. Trust me, it's worth it. They say that if you try and please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Well, this game doesn't really seem to give a shit about pleasing people. It's completely unself-conscious about the way it pursues a singular vision to create a Western outlaw simulator. It's like they wanted to get as close as modern technology allows to Westworld, and it's unapologetic about that. Your horse shits, you smoke, and just scrubbing yourself in a bath is a minigame. Yeah, it's a video game released in 2018 in the age of social justice warrior professionally offended snowflakes, where smoking is a game mechanic and you can beat someone to death in the street because it's funny. Because it's only a video game. Sadly, however, this singular unapologetic vision has a dark side. The dark side is that this game is a springboard for Rockstar to peddle billions of dollars of microtransactions. This game is magnificent in so many ways, but it's also the bridgehead to probably the biggest microtransactional conduit of 2019. As long as you buy this game, enjoy the single player and keep your wallet firmly in your pocket when the in-game store opens, you will end up cashing out with a profit. Just make sure you keep your credit card away from this game, because I think this is a long con. I simply cannot believe for a second that Take-Two Interactive just got up in the morning and decided, fuck it, let's make a jolly little game without any of those awful microtransactions that made us billions of dollars the last time. Can anyone believe that? So I'm going to qualify that this review is for the single player mode only. I'll review multiplayer separately based on what magnitude of microtransactional blanket bombing occurs in the next months. The best compliment I can give Red Dead Redemption 2 is that I find playing on console very fatiguing. It's like trying to enjoy gaming whilst rewiring your brain at the same time. I only recently started to use a controller, so all the time I play is hard work. Nevertheless, I kept firing up my console day after day to play this game. It is literally the most immersed I've ever been in a console game. That's the thing with this game, you can get lost in it. It's got that whole Skyrim, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Fallout New Vegas thing going on. You get sucked in. You can end up spending whole days wandering off to strange locations to hunt bear and camp in the wilderness, or perfect your highway robbery and stagecoach hijacking skills. Red Dead Redemption has done a solid job of making robbery, banditry and lawlessness incredibly good fun, and making it a skill set that requires finesse and expertise to execute competently and profitably. But the real artistry here is that at the very same time that it does this, it's also a game where you might waste a whole afternoon hunting in the mountains, obsessing about the quality of your animal pelts, fishing by the lake, or beating tramps to death. It's entirely up to you. This is a good game, and despite its flaws, well worth the money. But for now, good luck, and happy hunting.
For Christ's sake.